We often hear that our early experiences matter, but how deep does that go? What if stress that happens even before you're born, could leave a permanent, lifelong mark on your body's ability to fight off disease? Well, get this. A really fascinating study has uncovered a biological puzzle that might just turn everything we think we know about stress completely on its head.
So this is the core question that researchers set out to answer. And it's a huge one. The idea that a stressful environment for a mother could literally echo through her child's entire life, making them more vulnerable to things like cancer or infections as an adult, that's a pretty wild thought. But scientists found a way to actually dig in and investigate it.
Okay, so how on earth do you even begin to untangle a connection that spans an entire lifetime? Well, you start with a really clever experiment and a very specific suspect. The researchers designed this study to see if they could find a hard biological link between that super early period of life and how the immune system works in an adult.
To figure this out, here's what they did. They gave pregnant mice a synthetic stress hormone. It's called dexamethasone, or DEX for short, just by putting it in their drinking water. But the key, and this is really important, was the timing. They zeroed in on what's called the perinatal window, that crucial period when so many of the body's systems, especially the immune system, are being built and calibrated for the first time. After that, the pups were just raised normally and then studied when they were adults.
Now, before we get to the results, we need to meet the hero of our story, the CD8 T cell. You've probably heard of them as killer T cells, and honestly, that's the perfect name. Think of them as the elite special forces of your immune system. Their whole job is to patrol your body, find cells that have gone rogue, turned cancerous or been hijacked by a virus, and then, boom, take them out. They are absolutely critical.
So, the big question, how did the T cells in those adult mice, the ones exposed to that early stress, actually perform? Well, when the researchers challenged them with melanoma tumor cells, the results were, wow. They were just staggering. The normal control mice were able to fight back. You can see their tumors grew much slower. But the mice that were exposed to DEX early in life, they just couldn't mount a defense. Their tumors grew way, way faster.
And this wasn't just a one-off thing against cancer. The exact same weakness popped up when they challenged these mice with a bacterial infection. The adult mice from that early stress group just couldn't clear the bacteria as well. So it was crystal clear. Their immune soldiers, those killer T cells, had been compromised, and this weakness was literally programmed into them from the very beginning of their lives.
So, we've got a weakened immune system. The obvious answer seems pretty simple, right? Early life stress must lead to a life of being chronically stressed out, more stress hormones, which leads to weaker immunity. But this is where the story takes a fascinating and completely unexpected turn.
This is what pretty much all of us would guess. We've all heard it a million times. Chronic stress is bad for you. High levels of hormones like cortisol suppress your immune system. So you'd think the researchers were expecting to find that these adult mice were just walking around with their stress hormones cranked up to 11 all the time.
But what they found was the complete opposite. This result just flips the whole script. When they measured the baseline levels of the main stress hormone in mice, it's called corticosterone, the mice that had been exposed to early life stress had significantly lower levels of it as adults. Not higher, lower. How crazy is that?
And this wasn't some fluke. The researchers themselves pointed this out directly in their paper. They said that early hormone exposure permanently altered the body's central stress response command center, which is called the HPA axis. This wasn't some temporary thing. It was a permanent, lifelong change to the system.
So this is the real puzzle, right? The weak immune system wasn't being caused by too much stress hormone, but by too little. How could having lower stress hormones possibly be a bad thing for the immune system? Well, the explanation is actually incredibly cool.
The answer, it turns out, lies in how our body regulates stress in the first place. It's not just a simple on-off switch. It's this finely tuned system, almost like a thermostat for your body. And as it turns out, that thermostat can be permanently reset very, very early in life.
And that system is the HPA axis we mentioned. It's basically a network that connects your brain to your adrenal glands, and its job is to constantly monitor everything to decide how much stress hormone to release. It's always trying to keep things in balance. And that thermostat analogy is just perfect. It has a set point, and it's always working to keep the hormone levels right at that point.
So here's how it all goes down. During that super sensitive early window, the flood of stress hormones basically tells the developing brain, whoa, The world out here is way too stressful. We need to be less sensitive to all this. So, in response, the HPA axis, the thermostat, gets permanently turned down to a lower set point. So then, as an adult, the body is always aiming for a lower than normal level of stress hormones. And here's the kicker. That new lower level just isn't enough to give those killer T cells the signal they need to wake up and do their job.
This brings us to what you could call a Goldilocks principle for T cells. It turns out they need the level of stress hormone to be just right. Too much hormone is bad. That's the classic stress-induced weakness we all know about. But as this study so brilliantly shows, too little hormone is also bad. T cells need this constant, just right trickle of a signal to stay healthy and ready to fight. The early life stress created a system that basically starves them of that crucial signal.
Okay, so this is all fascinating for mice in a lab, but what does it all mean for us? Why does understanding this one single biological mechanism matter so much? Well, it actually helps connect the dots on decades of observations about human health.
So let's just recap the key takeaways here. First, stress around the time of birth can literally program your immune system for the rest of your life. Second, it does this by permanently resetting your body's stress thermostat. Third, and this is the really surprising part, the result can be chronically lower, not higher stress hormones in adulthood. And finally, that lack of signal hobbles your killer T cells, leaving you more vulnerable to the very diseases they're supposed to fight.
So really, the true power of this research is that it gives us a how. For years and years, studies have shown this correlation. People who go through major adversity early in life often have higher rates of certain diseases when they're adults. This study gives us a real, tangible, biological mechanism that helps explain why that link exists. It's like a bridge between a life experience and what's happening inside our very cells.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. If something as fundamental as how our immune system responds to a threat can be calibrated in this tiny window at the beginning of life, it really makes you wonder, what else about the person we become, our metabolism, our resilience, our overall health, is being quietly and permanently written into our biology in those first, earliest days?